He rejected me the first time. He just doesn't know he's about to do it again. I knew it the moment I walked back into his great hall after 5 years gone, carrying a healer's basket and a name that was not mine. He looked straight through me, the way a man looks through a servant, through a stranger, through anyone who is not the woman he has spent half a decade tearing the north apart to find. He did not know that woman was holding his lemon balm and willow bark and watching him fail to recognise her. I was 25 that winter, a woman grown twice over by pack law, and I had buried the girl who once stood at his bonding ceremony in a shallow grave somewhere on the road south. Wren, they called me here. Wren the apprentice. Quiet, good with a poultice, came up from the coast packs when old Mistress Orla's hands began to shake. No one questioned it. A healer is furniture in a king's house. You only notice furniture when it's gone. I had not come back for him. I want that understood, because everything that followed will try to make a liar of me. And I was telling the truth that first night. I came back because Mistress Orla was dying and she had asked for me, and because the curse that broke my life in half had been waiting 5 years for me to be brave enough to come and break it back. The Alpha King sat at the head of the hall, the way iron sits in a forge, heavy, dark, holding heat it would not release. Halvar of the Iron Territories. The strongest wolf alive, they still said, though I thought the man on that throne looked like something the strength had outlived. Hollow at the temples, a stillness in him that the court mistook for power, and I recognised, with a small, cold drop in my stomach, as grief. There was an empty chair beside his, carved with running wolves. No one sat in it. No one had, the kitchen girls whispered, in 5 years. I set down my basket and got to work, and I did not look at the chair. And I told myself the not looking was nothing. Mistress Orla's quarters smelled of beeswax and old paper. She caught my wrist with a grip like dried vine the first night I tended her. "You came," she breathed. "Marin." My true name in her mouth was a struck bell. I had not heard it spoken aloud since the night he cut the cord. "Wren," I corrected, gentle, glancing at the door. Her eyes were milky, but they found mine. "He's been looking for you," she said. "The whole north knows it. He doesn't." I changed the cloth on her brow and said nothing, which is a skill I had spent 5 years acquiring. Here is the thing I had carried for 5 years and told no one, because there was no one, and because saying it would have made it true twice. At the ceremony, where the king of the Iron Territories was meant to bind himself to the fated mate his wolf had chosen, he had taken the bonding cord from the priest's hands, looked at me across the firelit hall full of his entire kingdom, and cut it. Not refused it, cut it. Drew a blade and severed the silver thread before the final knot, in front of every noble house in the north, and turned his back and walked out. A rejected bond is supposed to kill the weaker wolf. I was the weaker wolf. I should have died on that floor. I didn't. I crawled out a side door instead, and I lived, which the priests said was impossible. And I have spent 5 years learning enough of the old craft to understand why. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That night, kneeling by Mistress Orla's bed, all I knew was the question I had carried like a stone in my shoe down every road since. Not, will I survive it? I had survived it. But why did he cut the cord instead of simply letting it lie? A man who does not want you does not need a blade. He only needs to do nothing. That was the gap I could not close. That was why I had really come back. I will admit it now, even if I would not admit it then. The second night, he came to the healer's quarters. I heard him before I saw him, the hall going quiet the way a forest goes quiet, all the small sounds ducking. Then he was in the doorway, too large for it, and his eyes went past me to the old woman on the bed, and his whole face changed into something almost human. Mistress Orla raised me, he told the room, which did not need telling. He crossed to her. He did not look at me. How does she fare? The fever's turned, I said, and busied my hands. She'll wake before the moon's full again. He went still. I have thought a great deal since about that stillness. At the time, I thought I had said something wrong. He stood over the bed of the woman who'd mothered him, and he did not look at the dying woman at all anymore. He looked at the back of my neck, where I had bent over my work, and I felt it the way you feel a window left open in winter, a cold attention, a draught of something. Your voice, he said. My hands did not shake. I have that to be proud of, at least. My lord? A long pause where the next word should have been. His wolf was awake in him. I could feel it pressing at the bond's old ragged edge, the one everyone but me believed was healed clean. He doesn't know, I told myself. His wolf knows. He does not. The cord he cut had severed the man from the truth as neatly as it severed me from the floor. Nothing, he said at last. You remind me of someone. I have one of those faces. The smallest sound came out of him. It took me a moment to understand it had been a laugh, or the ruin of one. He left without finishing whatever he had come to say, and I stood in the dark a long while afterward, with my heart doing something I had ordered it years ago to stop doing. He came to the library the next afternoon, which kings do not do. Mistress Orla kept her books in a long room off the king's study, and I'd been left to sort them while she slept. To pull the herbals from the histories, the useful from the merely old. I was halfway up a ladder with my arms full of a century of someone's marginalia when I heard the door and felt the whole room change temperature. You are not the one I expected to find up there, the king said. Mistress Orla is sleeping, my lord. I am to mend her shelves while she does. I came down a rung. Was there a book? There was a pause, exactly long enough for me to understand he had not, in fact, come for a book, and to watch him understand it at the same moment. A herbal, he said, recovering. Bound in grey. She used to read me out of it when I was small enough to be read to. He looked at the shelves as though they might volunteer it. I find I cannot recall a single word of it now, only that she read it. I found it for him in a quarter hour. He could have sent a steward. We both knew it. Neither of us said it. When I came down the ladder, the stack in my arms shifted and slid, and before I had finished deciding whether to drop it or fall with it, he had crossed the whole length of that room and put one hand beneath the books to steady them, near enough that I could have counted the grey at his temple, 3 full paces closer than a king has any reason to stand to an apprentice he does not know. He went still. So did I. The books sat safe between us, ridiculous, the only thing either of us was willing to look at. My lord moves quickly, I observed, for a man who claims to have forgotten a book. He took his hand back as though the herbals had bitten it. Something crossed his face, not quite alarm, more the look of a man checking his own pockets for a thing he was certain he had a moment ago. I did not... He stopped. He frowned down at his own hand. I do not know why I did that. I did. I had felt his wolf reach across that room a full breath before his feet caught up to it. But the kitchen boy stacking kindling in the doorway had seen the whole of it. the king of the Iron Territories bolting across a library to rescue a servant's armful of mildewed leaves. And by supper, I knew, the entire Undercroft would have the tale. I held out the grey-bound herbal. He took it and did not open it. He held it the way men hold things they have decided to keep. "Thank you, Wren," he said, and left with a book he had not come for, walking at a pace that was trying very hard to look unhurried. I went back up the ladder. I told myself the climbing was so that he would not see my face. I found the cord 3 days later. I was not snooping. I will defend that to my last breath, even though no one believes it. Mistress Orla had sent me to his study for a particular root she kept in his cabinet. She'd tended the king's own ailments for years and kept her stores in his rooms, near the fire, where the damp wouldn't reach them. I went in expecting bottles. I found, in a drawer that did not lock, beneath a folded square of grey wool, a length of silver cord, severed clean at one end. My cord, the one he cut. He had kept it. 5 years. Through 5 years of searching, of tearing apart the roads of the north, he had kept the proof of the thing he'd done, folded in wool like a relic. I was still holding it when the door opened. Lady Ingrid found me there, and I understood at once that of all the people in that fortress, she was the one who had never stopped looking at faces. She was beautiful the way a frost is beautiful, clean, total, killing. The court had her halfway to Luna already. The advisers spoke of the alliance her bloodline would bring, and the empty carved chair, they murmured, would not stay empty forever. She came into the room like she owned the air in it. "The healer's apprentice," she said, "in the king's private study, holding the king's private grief." Her eyes moved over me, slow, and I watched her arrive somewhere. "You have a coastal look." They said the girl from the ceremony was a coastal nobody. "I came up from the coast packs a month ago, my lady." "Did you?" She smiled. It did not reach anything. What a long way to come to hold a piece of string. I put the cord back in its wool. My hands were steady. I have said that already. I keep saying it because it is the only thing I had. "Mistress Orla sent me for valerian root, my lady. I'll trouble you no further." She let me pass. She watched me go. And at the door she said, light as snowfall, "I do hope the old woman recovers. It would be a shame if her medicines did not agree with her." 2 days later, Mistress Orla's fever came roaring back, worse than before, and her lips went blue at the edges, and I tasted the tincture I had not made that someone had left in my place on the shelf, and under the valerian, faint and bitter and unmistakable, the cold mineral note of crushed wolfsbane. Wolfsbane. In a healer's store, in a dose meant to look like a tired apprentice's mistake. It nearly worked. I will tell you plainly, but it nearly worked. Because I had been trained to trust my own shelf, and I had reached for that bottle without looking, the way you reach for a thing you have set down 100 times. I caught it on my tongue with the spoon already at the old woman's mouth. One more breath, and I would have killed the woman I'd come to save, and been hanged for it. And the only person who knew my true name would have died believing I'd done it. I poured the tincture into the fire. It burned green. Mistress Orla lived. I sat up 3 nights pulling her back, and on the 3rd night, grey with no sleep, I went to find the king, because Lady Ingrid had made a mistake. She thought she was poisoning an apprentice. She did not know she was waking up a woman who had spent 5 years learning exactly what poisons taste like, and why. If you have stayed with me this far, through the cord and the wolfsbane and the lady who smiles like a hard frost, stay a little longer. What I learned on that cliff is the part I have never told a living soul, And I find I would like, just once, to be heard while I tell it. If her voice is one you would keep company with on a long night, you know the small kindness the bell below is asking for. Now, the cliff, and the thing he finally said. I found him on the cliff path above the fortress, alone, which a king is never supposed to be. The wind came off the sea hard enough to lean on. He stood at the edge with his back to me and did not turn, and I understood he had heard me coming and chosen not to send me away. Someone put wolfsbane in my mistress's medicine, I said. No title. I had run out of them somewhere on the stairs. I know, he said. That stopped me. Lady Ingrid's hands are clever, he went on, still facing the water. Her father's house is cleverer. They have wanted the empty chair for a long time, and they have decided the surest way to it is to be useful to me, to find the woman I am looking for, or to make certain no one else can. He turned then. The grief was right there on the surface of him, no court between us to make him hide it. I let them search. It was the only way I could keep searching myself without my advisors calling it madness. I did not think they would start cutting away the people near me to do it. Why are you looking for her? I asked. I had not planned to. The wind took the words half out of my mouth, and I let it. He was quiet long enough that I thought he would not answer. Then, because I owe her a debt I can never pay, and because I am dying of having paid it. He said it the way you'd report weather. 5 years ago, my wolf chose his mate at the bonding fire. The same night, an hour before the rite, a man came to me out of the dark with a witch's mark on his tongue, and a message from the house that wanted me dead. The moment I completed the bond, the moment the cord was knotted and my mate was claimed before the pack, she would die of it. A curse laid in the cord itself. Bind her and bury her by the next moon. The sea kept moving. I do not think I did. So I cut it, he said, in front of everyone. I made them all believe I had found her wanting. Better the whole North think me cruel than let one of them suspect the cord was poisoned. Because if they knew it could be done, they would only do it again, to the next and the next. I cut the bond before it closed. I severed my own wolf from his mate to keep her alive. His jaw moved once. It should have killed her anyway. A rejected bond kills the weaker wolf. I have searched 5 years for a grave I could not find, because some nights I let myself believe she lived, and I am told that is the cruelest thing a man can do to himself. I had come up that cliff path full of a thing to say. I forgot all of it, everything I had carried for 5 years. The shame, the certainty that I had been weighed in front of the whole North and found to be nothing. The long cold work of building a woman out of the wreckage of a girl, all of it turned over in the air between us and landed facing the other way. He had not discarded me. He had stood in front of his entire kingdom and burned his own name to the ground to keep me breathing. A man who does not want you does not need a blade. He had needed the blade because he wanted me so much that nothing less than a public lie would do. My lord, I said, and my voice did the thing I had spent 5 years forbidding it. Why did you keep the cord? He looked at me, this stranger he had told everything to, this apprentice with a coastal look, and something crossed his face. Not recognition, not yet, but its shadow, the way you feel a name you cannot find. Because it is the only piece of her I was allowed to keep, he said. Now I have told a healer's apprentice what I have not told my own beta. You should go in, the wind is cold. I went in. I did not tell him. I want you to understand I had reasons. The curse was still in the cord, still waiting. Ingrid was still moving. He had built 5 years of careful lies to keep me alive, and I would not undo them in a gust of feeling on a cliff. But under the reasons was the smaller, truer thing, the one I am only admitting to you. I was afraid that if I said I am Marin, he would look at the woman I had become and find her wanting, and this time it would be real. So I did the coward's brave thing. I went to break the curse instead. It took me 11 days and Mistress Orla's whole library, and 3 burns on my left hand from holding salt and silver in the same fist. But I unpicked the working laid in that cord, the way you unpick a knot in the dark. By feel, by patience, by refusing to stop. A curse of that make has a spine to it. It does not want to be undone. On the worst night, the cold came up out of the silver and into my wrists, and I felt it reaching for my heart the way it had reached 5 years ago. The curse remembering me, recognizing the wolf it had been built to kill. I held on. I have always been better at holding on than anyone gave me credit for. By the last night, the cord lay quiet in my hands, harmless, only silver again. I had just made it safe to be loved by the king of the Iron Territories. That was, of course, the night Lady Ingrid chose to end me. She did it at the high feast, in the full hall, with the carved empty chair gleaming at the king's side, and every noble house of the north watching. She rose with her cup, and she smiled at me, where I stood against the wall with the other servants, and she said in a voice pitched to carry, "My Lord King, before we drink, a gift. I have found her, the woman you have sought for 5 years. She has been standing in your hall the whole while, pouring your physic and wearing another woman's name." The hall went the kind of silent that has weight. "The coastal apprentice," Ingrid said, turning, lovely and merciless, "is the girl from the bonding fire, the one you cast off. I wonder, my lord, when you put the same blade to the same cord a second time, will the whole north watch you do it again?" She knew. Of course she knew. Her house had laid the curse. She knew the only way to be rid of me forever was to make him claim me in the open, where the curse could close and finish what it was built to do. She was not exposing me. She was handing him the knife and daring him to be a coward twice. And either way I died, claimed by the curse, or cast off again in front of everyone, broken past surviving a second time. Halvar stood. I watched him understand it all at once. The apprentice, the voice, the woman his wolf had been pacing toward for a month. And I watched 5 years come down on him like a roof. "Marin," he said. My name. He had it now. The whole hall heard him give it to me. "My lord, the curse," his beta started, half out of his chair. "I know what the cord carries," Halvar said, and his eyes never left me. "I have carried the other half of it for 5 years. He came down off the dais. The court parted for him, because the court has always parted for him. He crossed the whole length of that hall to where I stood among the servants, and he stopped 1 pace away, 1 pace, when a king claiming his mate has every right to close it. And he held out his hand, palm up, the way you offer something to a creature that has been hurt and may not come. "They will tell you I rejected you," he said, low, only the front of the hall close enough to hear, though every soul in it strained to. "I let them tell you that. I let you carry it for 5 years to keep you breathing. And there is no apology in any language that pays for those years. You owe me nothing. You never did. My wolf chose you before I had the wit to, and I have spent half a decade trying to catch up to him." His hand did not waver. "I am not asking you to take the bond. I am asking you to take my hand, here, so that everyone watching knows I would rather die claiming you than live having let you go twice." Lady Ingrid's smile had gone fixed. "The cord will kill her," she said, too quickly, and that was her mistake, because no one had said anything about the cord, and the whole hall heard a woman name the weapon before the wound. I looked at her. I did not raise my voice. I had learned, over 5 years, that the quiet thing cuts deeper than the loud one. "The cord is clean," I said. "I unpicked your grandmother's working 11 nights ago in a dead woman's library. You built it to kill a frightened girl. You should have come back to check whether she grew up." Then I took his hand. "I will tell you what the kiss was, because you have stayed with me this long and you have earned it. And then I will tell you no more about it, because some things are mine." He bent his head to me, and I felt the whole weight of 5 years lift off the both of us at once, like a held breath finally let go. Like a door I had been standing outside of for half a decade, swinging open onto a fire that had been kept lit the entire time I was gone. That is all. That is everything. The rest is ours. The cord, when the priest brought it, the same cut cord, my cord, mended now by my own burned hands, went around our joined wrists, and the old curse in it did not stir, because there was nothing left in it to stir. And Halvar of the Iron Territories knotted the bond he had severed 5 years before, in front of the same kingdom that had watched him cut it, and his wolf, when the bond closed, made a sound through me that I felt in the centre of myself. A warmth flooding up the thread that had been ragged and cold, so long I had forgotten it was meant to be anything else. It did not kill me. It welcomed me home. There was still cost. There is always cost. As the bond closed, the dregs of the broken curse made one last reach. Not for me this time, but for the cord itself, a cold trying to crawl back into the silver, and I felt it pull at the half-healed burns on my hand and bite down to the bone, the old magic refusing to die quietly. I closed my fist around the cord and held it shut, frost climbing my wrist, and I did not let go until the cold gave up and went out of the silver for good. Blood from the burns made a dark line down my palm. I had bled worse for less. I had bled, once, for nothing at all on a ceremony floor. This time I bled and got to keep the thing I bled for. Lady Ingrid did not leave the hall a free woman. She had named the curse aloud in front of every house in the north, and there is no walking that back. Her father's alliance dissolved before the feast was cleared. The king's justice was cold and complete, and I will not waste your time on it, except to say that the carved, empty chair beside the throne stopped being empty, and the woman who had wanted it spent the rest of her days a great deal farther from a throne than she had planned. Mistress Orla recovered enough to scold me for the state of my hands. She died the following spring, old and warm in her bed, having lived precisely long enough to see me wear the title she'd always said I was too stubborn to refuse. The whisper did not stop all at once. A king who shames a woman before the North and crowns her 5 years later does not simply hand the court a tidy ending. There were houses that muttered, rivals who counted the cost of the lost alliance and wondered if the king had gone soft. Old wolves who could not decide whether they had watched a love story or a humiliation. Halvar let them mutter. He had spent 5 years caring what the North believed about him, and had nothing left over to spend on it now. Let them say I went soft, he told me once, watching the muttering houses from the high window. I went soft the night my wolf chose a coastal nobody. I have only just stopped pretending otherwise. A year on, now, and I am writing this from the library that became mine when Mistress Orla's became no one's. The chair beside the throne has my weight worn into it. The cord hangs on the wall where the cut used to show and does not anymore. I mended it well. You would have to know exactly where to look. He still does not say my name the way other people say names. He says it like a thing he is allowed to keep. I have stopped correcting him to Wren. I had to be Wren to come home, but I do not have to be her anymore. And there is a particular freedom in being called by your own name in your own house, by a man who burned his reputation to keep you alive enough to hear it. He came in a moment ago, while I was writing this, and set a cup of something down at my elbow too carefully, the way he does, and looked at the page, and did not ask what it was, and left the door open behind him when he went, the way he always does now. So I will know I can follow whenever I please. I told you he rejected me the first time. I told you he was about to do it again. I was wrong about the second one. It turns out the most powerful wolf alive would sooner cut a cord and burn his own name to ash than let me go. And the only thing that ever frightened him more than losing me was being seen wanting me this badly in front of his entire kingdom. He's seen wanting me now. The whole North knows it. He doesn't seem to mind anymore. So tell me, did you see it coming? The cliff and the cord and the second cut that never came? Or did he fool you the way he fooled me all those years, into thinking the blade meant the opposite of what it meant? Stay a while in the comments and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read them all, by candlelight, in the library that's mine now. And if you want to know whose story comes next out of the Iron Territories, you know where the bell is. Ring it, and stay with me. There's always another door left open. I had counted 4 ways out of that cart before we reached the 2nd mile, and thrown all 4 away by the 3rd. The first was the obvious one. Wait for the dark, slide over the back rail, run for the tree line. But the man who had bought me rode close enough behind that I could hear his horse breathing, and he never once let the distance grow. 3 paces, always 3 paces. Far enough to be courteous, close enough to catch a woman who fancied herself clever. So I sat with my hands folded over the bundle that held everything I still owned. A comb, a clean shift, my mother's bone awl, and I studied him the way you study a lock you intend to pick. He had paid for me without haggling. That was the part I could not get past. My father had named a price meant to be argued down, the way you salt a wound you expect to be paid for. And the cloaked stranger had simply counted out the coin and turned his horse, as if the number had never been the thing he came for. No one pays the first price. Not for grain, not for a mule, and certainly not for a debtor's daughter sold to clear a season of bad luck and worse decisions. A man who does not haggle is a man who wants something other than what he is buying. I was 23, old enough to know that, and old enough to be afraid of it. I did not let him see the fear. I have a face I keep for collectors and creditors, smooth as a frozen pond, and I wore it for him the whole first day. He did not seem to require anything of me. He did not speak. He rode his 3 paces back and watched the road, and once, when the cartwheel caught a rut and pitched my bundle into the mud, he was off his horse and had it back in my lap before I had finished reaching for it. He did not say a word about that either. He only looked at the awl handle showing through the cloth, and something crossed his hooded face that I could not read, and then he was back in the saddle, and we went on. I decided I hated him. It was tidy and it was free, and it gave my hands something to do. The second night, he made the fire on my side of the camp. I noticed because I was cold and trying not to be seen being cold, and the heat reached me before I understood why. He had built it where the wind would carry the warmth to where I sat, and taken the cold side for himself. And he did it without comment, the way some men open doors, not as a kindness offered, but as a thing the body does before the mind can object. Then he set a cup of something hot on the stone between us, 3 paces of stone exactly, and went to see to the horses. I did not drink it for a long time. Then I drank it, because I was cold and the cup was right there, and pride is a poor blanket. "You can take the bay mare in the morning," he said when he came back. His voice was low and even, like a man reading a list he had already decided not to argue with. "The road behind us runs 3 days to the river crossing. Your father's debt is settled regardless of where you sleep tomorrow. You owe me nothing." I looked at him over the rim of the cup. "You bought me to set me loose." "I bought you." He stopped there, as if the sentence had gone somewhere he had not authorized. His jaw moved once. "What you do after is yours." Most men who say that are lying. I am aware. He looked at the fire and not at me. "You may find out which kind I am, or you may take the mare. Both are open roads." It was, I would learn, the most honest thing he ever said to me, and he said it before I knew his name. I should have taken the mare. I want that understood, because everything else in this story turns on the fact that I did not. In the morning, the bay was saddled and the road behind us was empty and free, and I stood looking at it for a long while with my bundle in my arms. He did not watch me decide. He gave me that, at least. He busied himself with a girth strap and let me have the choice in private, which is the only way a choice is ever really yours. I told myself I stayed because a man who does not haggle is a man with a secret, and I have never in my life been able to leave a secret alone. That was true. It was not all of it, but it was the part I could say to myself without flinching, so it was the part I used. We had been 4 days on the road when the patrol found us. They came out of the pines at a hard canter, a dozen riders in grey and iron, and my first thought was bandits, and my second was that my hated buyer had gone very still in a way that was not fear. He raised one gloved hand. The riders checked their horses so fast the lead mare nearly sat down in the road. Then he pushed back his hood. I had spent 4 days building him out of guesses. A merchant, a slaver, a minor lord with a taste for debtor brides. I had been wrong in every particular. He had a hard, unhurried face, and grey eyes that did not blink enough, and a white scar through one brow that I would later learn he did not remember earning. He looked like exactly what he was, which I did not yet know, but the patrol knew. Every rider in grey and iron came off the saddle and went down on one knee in the wet road, helms bowed, and the captain put his fist over his heart and said, "My king." The word went through me like cold water down the spine. I had been bought, transported, fed, and offered a horse by Halvar of the Iron Territories, the Alpha King whose name mothers use to make children behave, the strongest wolf alive. And I had spent 4 days deciding I hated him and drinking his tea. He did not look at the kneeling men. He looked at me, and I will tell you the truth, because the truth is the whole point of telling it at all. He looked like a man who had just been caught. They brought us through the gates of the Ironhold at dusk, and the whole fortress had heard before we crossed the bridge. That is the thing about a king who has never once brought a woman home. You do not need to announce it. The kitchens know, and the kitchens tell the stables, and the stables tell the guard. And by the time the great doors opened, the wolf throne hall was full of faces all arranged into the careful blankness of people who very much want to ask a question they are not permitted to ask. I knew that blankness. I had worn it myself, 4 days running. A woman came down the length of the hall to meet us, and she did not wear it. She wore something better made. A gown the colour of old wine, dark hair coiled with silver pins, the unbothered grace of someone who has never in her life had to wonder whether she belonged in a room. She stopped at a precise and insulting distance and looked at me the way you look at mud someone has tracked across a clean floor. "My king," she said to him warmly, "we did not expect you to return with cargo." Lady Sigrun. He had gone formal and flat, a drawbridge pulling up. "This is Wren. She is a guest of the hold." A guest? Sigrun's smile did not move. How novel. And where does a guest of the hold come from, that she arrives in a debtor's cart with a bone awl in her bundle, and the king riding rearguard like a hired man? The hall held its breath. Osric, the broad, grey-bearded beta at the king's shoulder, shifted his weight in the particular way large men shift when they are calculating whether they will shortly need to stand between two people. I had a choice. I have learned that the king had been right about that. On the road, there is always a choice, and the only question is whether you can see it in time. I could have looked at the floor. It was what the gown wanted. I looked at Lady Sigrun instead, and I let my collector's face go, and I let her see that I had counted every pin in her hair and found them wanting. I come from a village 3 days past the river crossing, where we cannot afford to look at a person and see only what they cost. I let the silence do a little of the work. You will forgive me, it is a poor habit of the poor. I heard, somewhere down the hall, a single startled breath that someone tried very hard to swallow. Sigrun's smile finally moved. Just at the corner. Just enough. "Charming," she said, and it was a sentence with a knife folded inside it. "I look forward to discovering what you are for." She turned in a sweep of wine-dark skirts and left, and the king watched her go with no expression at all. And I understood 3 things in quick succession. That the woman in the gown had expected, for some long time, to be the one standing where I stood. That she was not a fool. And that I had just made, in my first hour under his roof, an enemy who would not give me the courtesy of a fair fight. I would have liked to feel clever about the way I had handled her. Mostly, I felt the cold of the stone coming up through my thin shoes, and the strange new weight of the king standing exactly 3 paces away, watching me as if I had done something he had not known a person could do. They gave me to the healer's wing, which suited me, because hands that have learnt to set a bone and bind a wound do not sit idle well, and my mother's awl had been a healer's awl before it was a relic. Within a week, the old healer let me grind her tinctures. Within 2, she let me hold the needle. Work is the one currency that does not care where you were born, and I had always been rich in it. The king I saw at the edges, a figure at the high table who ate little and watched the doors. A shape in the corridor who altered his path, I noticed, so that we did not pass close. 3 paces, always. It would have been easy to read as contempt. The court read it as contempt. I heard the kitchen talk. The king tolerates the debtor woman. The king will tire of his odd whim. Lady Sigrun need only wait. I almost read it that way myself. What stopped me was the small things, and I have always been a creature of small things. A book appeared in the healer's wing, a herbal, rare and well made, left on the bench where I worked, with no name attached. The fire in my room was laid each evening before I returned to it, by no hand I ever caught. When the winter teeth came down off the mountains, and the healer fretted about the cost of beeswax for the burn salve, 3 crates of it arrived from the king's own stores, and the steward who delivered them could not, when I asked, say who had ordered it. I am a healer's apprentice and a debtor's daughter, and I have spent my whole life reading what people do instead of what they say, because what they say is for sale, and what they do is not. And what this man did, over and over, in the dark, without signature, was take care of me, and then keep 3 paces of cold stone between us in the light, as if the distance could unsay the warmth. A man does not hide a cruelty. He hides a tenderness he has decided he is not allowed to have.
If you have stayed with me this far, stay a little longer.
What I found in that library is the part I have told almost no one. The part where this stopped being a story about a man who bought me and became something I am still not certain I have the words for. If her side of it is keeping you company tonight, follow along and I will keep telling it. I went looking for the reason. Of course I did. I told you I cannot leave a secret alone. The Library of the Ironhold is a long, high room that smells of cold parchment and pine resin, and the king was in it the night I came for answers, which I had not expected and did not, in the moment, regret. He stood at the far table with a book open under his hands, green leather worn pale at the spine from handling. He did not hear me at first, or pretended he did not, and I had a moment to watch him that he had not arranged. And what I saw was a man reading something the way you read a wound, to see if it has worsened in the night. "You leave fires," I said. His hands went still on the book. "The wing is cold." "You leave herbals, and beeswax, and a guest in the healer's wing she did not ask to be." I crossed half the distance and stopped, because I had learned his rule, and I wanted him to feel me break it. "You bought a woman to set her free, and then you did not set her free. You keep her 3 paces off in the daylight and warm in the dark. I have stood in this hold a month, my king, and I have one question, and you owe me nothing, but I am going to ask it anyway." He looked at me then. The grey eyes did not blink enough, and behind them something moved that was not his. Something older and surer and entirely uninterested in his composure. "Ask," he said, and his voice did the thing the kitchen talk had never mentioned. It frayed, just at the edge, just on the one word. "Why did you not let me take the mare?" For a long moment, the only sound was the fire and the wind working at the high windows.
"I told you to," he said.
"You saddled it and looked away. That is not the same as wanting me gone." I held his eyes the way no one in that hold dared, because I had nothing his court was afraid to lose. "You wanted me gone, and you could not make yourself watch the road to be sure I went. Which is it?" His jaw moved once, twice, the way it had on the first night, a man losing an argument with his own mouth. He shut the green book. He came around the table and stopped. 3 paces. "Both," he said. "It is both, every hour, and it does not resolve. Now go back to the wing, Wren, please." It was the please that undid me. A king does not say please. A king has men to make the word unnecessary. He said it like it had cost him a tooth, and I went, because I had what I came for, which was the certainty that I had not imagined the warmth, and a new question worth more than the old one. What does a man read every night in a green book that he holds like a fresh wound? I found out 8 days later, and it broke the story I had been telling myself clean in half. He was called away to settle a border dispute, 2 days' ride, and he left in a grey dawn without seeking me out, the way he always left. The library was unlocked. I am not proud of what I did, but I have never claimed to be a better woman than I am. And the green book was there, on the table, where his hands knew to find it. It was a ledger, not of grain or gold, of people. Page after page of names in his own hard hand, each with a sum beside it, and a place. A village, a market, a debtor's jail. And beside each name, drawn through it in a single deliberate line, the word freed. Years of it, hundreds of them. Debt-bonded men and women he had bought, The way he had bought me, paid for without haggling and quietly let loose, given coin and a road and their own name back.
A king moving in disguise through his own territory, undoing one cruelty at a time, and telling no one, because the telling would have made it a policy, and he did not want it to be a policy. He wanted it to be a debt he was paying. To whom, the ledger did not say. I turned to the last page, and there I was. Wren, the sum my father had named, the village 3 days past the crossing. And my name was not struck through with freed. My name was crossed out, and written again, and crossed out, and written again, 4 times, 5, the ink going darker each pass where the nib had dug deeper and deeper. A man at a table in the dark, arguing with himself, writing freed and unable to mean it, writing it and striking it because his hand would not finish the word, until the page beneath the name was nearly worn through. I understood then what both meant. He had not been keeping me. He had been trying every night to set me free, the way he had set free hundreds before me, and something in him would not let the pen complete the line. And he had hated himself for it 3 paces deep, every single day, in front of his whole court, and I had thought it was contempt. I sat down on the cold library floor with the ledger in my lap, and I did not feel clever at all. I felt as though I had walked a month past a door I thought was a wall. Osric found me there. The beater did not ask what I was reading. He could see it. He lowered himself onto the bench with the care of an old soldier and looked at the green ledger for a while. His mother's name is on the first page, he said at last. Did you find it? I had not. I turned back. There it was, the very first entry, in a younger and less certain hand. A woman's name, a sum, a village, and no freed beside it. Just a date, and below the date, a second date, 4 months later. She was a debt bride, Osric said, sold north to pay her family's tithe, to a lord who took her as a wolf takes a thing he is owed. The alpha that was, Halvar's father, bought her off that lord, meaning the old kind of mercy, the kind that keeps. She was his mate. He knew it the moment he saw her, and she could not. The old man stopped and started again, more carefully. A bond can be refused. She refused it, because she had been bought once and would not be a thing that was bought again, not even by the man fate had chosen. Refusal is not free. It took her in 4 months. The boy watched it take her. The 2 dates, 4 months apart. He swore an oath at her grave, Osric went on, and his voice had gone to gravel. Witnessed, the binding kind, sworn on her bones and his own wolf, that no debtor would ever again be brought into the house of the Iron King. He has kept it for 20 years. It is why the ledger ends in freed. Every name, set loose, never kept. The oath would not allow keeping. It is woven into him. The cold came up through the floor and into my hands. The cold was already in my hands. And then his wolf chose a woman in a debtor's cart. Osric looked at me with something close to pity, which I did not want, and something close to hope, which frightened me more. His wolf knew you in the market the moment he saw you, he said, before his mind did. That is why he paid the first price. He did not hear the haggling. He heard nothing but the bond. And now the oath he swore and the mate his wolf chose are at war inside one man, and the war does not end in a truce. The oath tightens on the wolf a little more each day he keeps you under this roof. I have served him since he was a pup, lass. I have watched it. He is being slowly torn in two, between the only vow he has ever kept
and the only thing he has ever wanted. And he will not tell you, because telling you would be asking you to choose him. And he has sworn never again to let a debt-bought woman be asked for anything at all. The ledger lay open in my lap, my name worn nearly through the page. I had come to the iron hold to find a secret and pick it like a lock. I had found a man dying quietly of his own decency, and a dead woman's name with no freed beside it. And I was, I realised, no longer at all interested in the road behind us. Lady Sigrun was interested in the ledger too. I learnt that the hard way. She had her own paths through that hold, older ones than mine, older than the king's patience. And she had been waiting 20 years for the bond she believed she was owed, and she was not, as I had noted my first hour, a fool. She knew what I had found before I had finished finding it. And she knew, far better than I, what could be done with it. She did it in open court, on the night the king returned. She stood up before the high table while the hall was full, while the king sat grey and thinner than he had been a month before, the oath eating him by inches. And she laid it all out in a voice pitched to reach the back of the room. That the king had broken his own sworn law, that he had brought a debt bride into his house, the one act he had vowed on his mother's bones never to permit. That the wolf they followed had become an oathbreaker for a healer's apprentice, and an oathbreaker king cannot hold the throne. And she called, sweetly, ruinously, for the bond to be dissolved, and the debtor woman cast out, before the king's broken vow brought a curse down on the whole pack. And she had brought a champion to make the point with teeth. Her cousin Dacian, a heavy-shouldered northern lord with a challenger's grin, stepped into the open floor and called the dominance challenge, the old physical kind, blood drawn, thrown at stake, knowing, as Sigrun knew, that the king was being hollowed out by the very oath she had just announced to the world. The hall erupted. Osric was on his feet, and the king stood slowly, and I watched the cost of standing in his face, and I understood that Sigrun had timed it perfectly. He could not win a challenge with his wolf half severed by the oath, and he could not refuse one without losing the throne, and, with it, every freed in that green book, because a deposed king's law dies with his reign, and the debtors after me would have no quiet stranger paying the first price in the dark. He looked at me across the crowded hall, 3 paces and 100 more, the farthest he had ever stood from me. And he chose, at the worst possible moment, to stop lying. She names me Oathbreaker, he said to the hall, in that flat drawbridge voice. She is right. I brought a debtor into my house. I have tried for a month to free her, every night, and I could not finish the word. He did not look away from me, not because the oath forbade it, because I did not want to. My mother died, refusing to be a thing that was bought. I will not compound her death by being a king who buys. So I will not free this woman against her will, and I will not keep her against it either. The choice was always hers. It is hers now, whatever it costs me. It was the most words I had ever heard him say at once, and every one of them was a man laying down his sword in the middle of a fight. The hall did not know what to do with it. Sigrun did. She smiled her corner smile and gestured at Dacian, and the floor was cleared for blood, and the king stepped down toward a fight he could not survive, because surviving it would have meant breaking faith with a grave. So I did the only thing I have ever been good at. I looked at a problem long enough to see the lock inside it. The oath bound him because his mother had been a thing that was bought and could not unmake herself into a thing that was free.
The oath ended in freed and could never end in kept, because keeping was the cruelty it was sworn against. But I was not a thing that was bought. I had been offered a mare and an open road, and I had stood looking at it with my bundle in my arms, and I had chosen, in private, where no one could buy or sell the choice, to stay. The oath was sworn to protect a woman from being kept against her will. It had never once been tested by a woman choosing to stay of her own. I walked into the cleared floor before Dacian's blade came up. "The debt is paid," I said, loud enough for the kitchens to hear it. He said so on the road, before I knew his name, before there was a throne to win or lose by it. I owe this house nothing. I am no man's cargo and no man's bride by debt. I turned from the hall to the king, and I crossed the open floor toward him, and I watched him go still the way he had gone still the first time I broke his rule. I am a free woman of a village 3 days past the crossing, and I am choosing, with nothing owed and nothing bought, to stay. Let the oath answer that. I do not have good words for what happened next. I have told it many times, and the words are always poor. The oath answered. It came up out of the stone floor where his mother's binding had been sworn, and it was cold. A cold with a will in it, old and grieving, and certain that to be bought was to be doomed, and it did not believe me. It closed on the air in my lungs and tried to take the breath I needed to finish choosing. Frost crept white across the back of my hands. I had taken the iron oath token from the table as I passed. I do not remember deciding to. And I closed my fist on its edge until it cut, because the pain was mine, freely taken, and the pain was the whole argument. Blood on my palm. My choice, paid in my own coin, the first price without haggling. I stay. The words came through a throat the cold was trying to close. Freely. Test it as long as you like. The answer does not change. And the old grief in the stone, 20 years of a boy's vow that the bought are always lost, broke against a woman who had not been bought and could not hold, and let go. The cold went out of the room all at once. The king came back into himself between one breath and the next, his wolf surging up, whole and freed, the severing undone. And Dacian's challenge died in his throat, because there is no challenging an alpha whose wolf has just been returned to him entire, in front of his entire court. And then, this is the part the kitchens still tell, the king's wolf bowed to me, not the man. The man was too proud and too stunned. The wolf came up in his grey eyes, and Halvar of the Iron Territories, the strongest wolf alive, went down on one knee on the bloody stone in front of the court that had called me cargo, and bowed his head, the way his patrol had bowed to him on the road, to a debtor's daughter with a cut palm and frost melting off her hands. I looked at Lady Sigrun over his bowed head. I did not raise my voice. I had learned, my first hour, that I did not need to. You asked what I was for. The hall was quiet enough to carry it. I think we have found it. She left the hold within the week, stripped of her standing by a court that had watched its king kneel, her cousin Dacian disgraced beside her, the two of them riding out the same gate I had been carried in through, and I will not pretend I felt nothing. Watching the wine-dark gown go small on the river road, I felt the cold satisfaction of a lock that finally turns. I am not a better woman than I am. There was fallout. There is always fallout. A king does not kneel to a debt-bought healer's apprentice without the whole north hearing of it, and there were lords who muttered, and a rival pack that sniffed for weakness, and a season of careful work for Osric and the king.
and in time, for me, to turn a broken oath and a scandalous Luna into something the pack could be proud of, rather than merely afraid of. Being chosen is not the end of the work. It is the start of a different kind. But that is a longer story, and a happier one, and I will tell it another night. He closed the 3 paces eventually. I had wondered if he would even know how. It was the green ledger that did it in the end. A month after the court, he brought it to the healer's wing and set it on my bench, open to the last page, where my name had been crossed out and written and crossed out near, through the parchment. He had a pen. His jaw moved once, the old habit. "I could finish it now," he said. "Strike it through. Freed, you are, whatever you wish." I looked at the worn, pale spine of the book he had read like a wound every night for years, and at all the names set loose ahead of mine, and at the single name that he had never been able to let go. I closed the ledger over the pen. "Leave it unstruck," I said. "I am not a name you freed. I am the one who stayed." And the man who did not haggle, who hid every tenderness 3 paces deep, who had not let himself want a single thing he was not allowed to keep. He crossed the stone between us at last, all of it, and he did not stop at 3 paces, and he kissed me. I will not tell you how. That belongs to me. I will tell you only that it was the first thing he had taken without first deciding he was forbidden it, and that something in me that had been braced since the back of a debtor's cart finally set its burden down, and that I understood, with his hands not on a sword or a book or a ledger, but only, gently, finally, holding mine. That I had been recognised, not bought, not freed, seen and chosen back. A year on, I keep the green ledger on a shelf in the Luna's solar, closed. He retired it, the disguise and the dark rides both, the season after we wed, not because the work was done, but because a king who kneels in open court need not move in secret any more. There is a magistrate now, and a writ, and a fund with the throne's seal on it, and debtors 3 days past the crossing, and well beyond it, walk into the iron hold by daylight, and walk out free with their own names in their own hands. The ledger does not need a hard man writing in the dark. It became a policy after all. He minded less than he thought he would. A letter came last month, from my father, who is older and poorer in spirit than in coin these days, and writes the way men write when they have understood, too late, the worth of what they sold. I have not decided what to answer. I have a year to decide, and a warm fire he still builds on my side of the room, out of a habit he will not admit to, and a king who has learnt to say please for things he is allowed to want, which turns out to be a great many things. He passed through the solar this morning while I was writing this, and stopped behind my chair, exactly 1 pace back, just to prove to me that he can, and then closed it because he wanted to. 3 paces was never the distance, I know that now. It was only the length of the argument he was losing, the whole long way down a debtor's road before he let himself arrive. Tell me, did you see who he was before he took off the hood, or did he fool you the way he fooled me all 4 days of that cart? Come find me in the comments and tell me where you are listening from tonight and what you would have done with that open road and that saddled mare. And if her side of the story is the kind you want more of, stay close. There are more names in that green ledger, and every one of them has a night like this in it.